달로좀 전작걸로 두세 다른 가서 두 디아레 안 주로 칼라 가서 피자 두잖아 야브레스.
So today we'll be discussing the wheel of sharp weapons, and it's very good that you could all make it today. Thank you.
네. 다들 가서 디치에데 야부종바이나 몸몸매는 디그레스.
And if we are able to really get some sort of deep value out of this teaching, it does not matter how many people have actually arrived.
야, 사제계는 주고 담고도 콩아드스요 알았어. 콩아들 모아도.
And we can see that in the first turning of the wheel, there were only actually 5 students that Buddha taught, so we have more than 5 students today.
야, 다들 가르치고 당가서 로정으로 가서 로정으로 아니 다 글로비 쇼스네 뭐도 다 간데 라린당 로정 그서 카니 용도 거스 로정 이제 로정 때야 상주 생고레스 상주 생
양주스요나
다네 글로바서 그러면 다 가당사마를 때네 로정 산다다 로정 천자콜로 산다 로정 치제마 산다다 로정 되뇌마 산다다 어떤 게 바지 용거스 You can see
that in the Kadampa tradition, the Galupa and the Kadampa tradition, there are 2 kinds of divisions of teachings. The mind training teachings that are where we can find texts such as the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, 8 verses for mind training, the 7-point thought transformation, and then the Lam Rim teachings, or the stages of the path teachings, where we find such texts as the Great Exposition on the Stages of the Path, and the abbreviated stages of the path, and so forth. So we can find those 2 divisions within the Galupa and the Kadampa traditions. And this is not exclusive to the Galupa tradition. You can find these teachings in the Kaju, Satya, and the various other lineages of Buddhism.
No. And
when we talk about what is necessary in order to do the practice of mind training, it's necessary to have bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to Buddhahood.
And
then when we talk about the actual teaching of mind training, you can find that the great master Atisha broke it down into 3 separate sections, the first being the preliminaries. And when we look at the preliminaries, we can find that the preliminaries contain the teachings which are shared in commons with the small scope and the medium scope. So these are the preliminaries of this particular practice. So this was said by the great master Atisha. And then when we look at the smallest scope, are the teachings shared in common with beings of the small capacity, we'll find that there's topics, various different topics contained therein. The first being the precious human rebirth, or the actual understanding of how valuable this human body that we've taken on is. Because based on this human body that we've taken on, we're able to do various activities which we would not be able to do if we did not have it.
And when we
have to always remember that although we have this precious human form and we've taken on this excellent existence, that it's impermanent and it disintegrates moment by moment. And we have to have this understanding that there is no permanence within this body. So it has this great ability to practice Dharma, but if we don't, then it will be of no great use.
or tendel dra dendron dra jawale khani ma du yo maris.
And we can see that once we pass away from this existence, there are no more than two places that we will end up. These two places being the lower realms or the higher realms. So we have to realize that this is the actual nature of our reality.
Oje ta dene ngasung le jeba ina an ngaso ngasung le jabi ne ba dene konju sung le yoris jawlu je woris jawlu nyalen je woris.
And if we wish to be free from the particular factors which would cause us a rebirth into the lower realms, it's very important for us to practice the ideas in the refuge and to really get a firm understanding and a stabilized realization of refuge.
Wada konju sung la jiao sung zhuwas, konju sung la jiao sung zhuwa, konju sung la jiao sung zhuwa dene neba zu dadal deman raburis, neba zu na yung du dadal jiao sung zhuwas, dadal me jing duwas. And
then when we talk about going for refuge to the three jewels, we can relate this to actually going to see a doctor or a person who was very ill, who had a disease, who needed to have a diagnosis, who goes to a doctor and is diagnosed and then given a particular medicine to cure that illness. So going for a refuge in that worldly sense is very similar to the refuge that we go for to the three jewels.
Oje tadne kashuware tadne goju sonla jasun ju gone an sanje ge songshabe chudu nyangsan la ge ina an ngasung ka to gur dunge ka to gur swaras.
And it's said that based upon the teachings and practicing the teachings that Lord Buddha taught, that we're able to eradicate the various causes of rebirth into these lower realms and completely abandon the faults which would cause rebirth into a state of suffering, or abandon the faults which cause suffering.
Oje tadne ngasung ta ne jebun din de ngasung ta ba ina de medan hal je ba ina ya ji dunge ga dunge chi dunge na dunge what do you goris da san ne da le ngaban ju ngaju san ta ke chebores.
And then once we move past the small scope to the medium scope, we begin to realize that just rebirth out of the eradicating the rebirth from the three lower realms is not enough. We come to get the understanding that even in the gods and human realms, we have the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and we have these various other forms of suffering. And it's based on that understanding that we develop a wish for liberation, and that wish for liberation is called renunciation, the wish to definitely get out. The literal translation of the word LoJong, translator's note, is called definitely get out. So it's based on the understanding of the various sufferings that the three higher realms also have to endure, that we are able to produce the realization of renunciation.
Oje tadne susu ge dunge ge ne chu san ne ngu ko samba de yong ba ina tene se je ge dunge du san tang yong du hiji je yong go hiji je yong go teba chenbo.
And then once we realize our own sufferings and wish to be free from them for ourselves, from our own side, and we have this idea of renunciation within our minds, at that point then, when our mind turns towards other beings who also have these types of suffering and develops a compassion to wish they did not have those various sufferings, at that point in time we've moved on to the great scope, or the teachings of the great capacity.
Oje dangan yugo samba ya da dung hondo namres da dan be shangchu shamba dan hije dan shangchu sen LoJong du teba chenbi chu LoJong yores.
And then you can see that this idea of compassion is within the preliminaries as well, because as we all know, we have to also have the realizations of love, the realizations of special intention, or the special mind. And we have to then to actually cause the realization of the mind that aspires to Buddhahood, which we seek.
Oje da teba chenbo de la dene jun shangchu sen ju le ji chu de la ane jun de menga du ju gun sen ji bi chu da da jen nya ba ji gun sen ju ju ni yoris.
And then when we talk about the actual subject of bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to Buddhahood, we'll find that there are two lineages, or two different divisions of causal factors for that realization of the mind that aspires to Buddhahood. Those two lineages are the 7-point cause and effect for attaining bodhicitta, and the equalizing and exchanging self and others. So those are the two actual causes for bodhicitta.
어제 다든니 난 단달로존 데 다제냐바 제고는 생지 주레스.
And then this particular teaching and mind training teachings in general, the equalizing and exchanging self and others is the practice that is taught for obtaining the mind that aspires to Buddhahood.
다제냐바 제고는 생지 주 다간에 용거르스나 안에 주 라진진데 쭌다고르스 라진진 쭌다고르스 라진진 저와 도마메반 다디바도 안가조 로아 리둘 쿠네 동안 요도 고야데 라제반지 진진기 제버스 라진진들 쭌다고르스.
And the idea contained within this particular teaching is that there are many faults in this grasping itself or cherishing self. So we begin to really look at the fact that since beginningless time, we've been born again and again and again into various realms of cyclic existence. And the reason we've had to be born into these suffering realms is based on our ideas and based on our self-cherishing attitude. And so these particular teachings in the mind training really outline the faults of having a self-cherishing attitude.
어제 다네 저 도마메바는 아주 나로 집 존나냐고 살로든 라제바지 제반지 대용하게 된지 제용거스 대용하게 녀모 제용거스 대용하게 레사네 는 콜 조아메 모두 코도거스.
And it's based on this fault of just cherishing ourselves that the other factors are produced, such as grasping itself, grasping at true existence, creating negative karmas and so forth, and actually not believing in the law of cause and effect. So it's based on our self-cherishing attitude that these other faults are produced.
다 제반지비 진진데 와데냐래제 워스 제반지와 안에 젠레 샹바공야 희지공야 짐바다야 추진송야 와도속걸로 제반지비 진진레스 와달라데네 안에 처와 사지고 고모용 거르스 딩 타바 용 거르스 타마 안 하다메 대선 용바데 제반지비 진진 되버스.
And then when we develop this attitude of starting to look at the cherishing others, there's various factors that are going to be necessary for us to practice. It'll be necessary for us to engage in the practice of love, engage in the practice of compassion, and so forth, in order for us to really develop this attitude that cherishes others. And based on this attitude that cherishes others, we're able to, at the greatest scope, obtain complete enlightenment or complete Buddhahood. At the medium scope, we're able to obtain liberation or nirvana in the lower sense. And in the smallest scope, we're able to obtain a rebirth into the gods and humans realms, into the three higher realms. So it's based on this attitude of cherishing others, and depending on our actual motivation and the level of scope, it produces the effects that are concordant with that scope.
어제 다드네 다자그 도마 사자문보다는 해망 아주 지버리스 안에 두콜 동에 요하는 요모 요하리스 더는 고 안에 라진진 봐요 제진진 냐래 제버리스 제진진 냐래 제벌 때네 고 사제송리스.
And we can see that our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, at one point in time was a being just like ourselves with the various negative factors. And based on an attitude that was produced in his mind that cherished others, he was able to obtain unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. So it was based on this other cherishing attitude and the eradication of a self-cherishing attitude that Buddha Shakyamuni was able to obtain his actual realizations.
딱 나중에 저와 도마메반 다디바도 수수집이 좋나냐베 라진진 냐래제도 그랬어. 예진진 요샤버스 다다바도 아주 상제마도도 대제버스.
And we can see that since beginningless time, we have done a practice, and that is the practice of cherishing ourselves and wishing for ourselves alone to just be in pleasant circumstances, and really haven't considered others. And it's based on that and based on those attitudes that we are where we are today, and we are not enlightened and we have not obtained Buddhahood.
오예 대답이 내주되는 제시심의 시와라기 쇼주고 송요와르스 아니 배신 로동 추지 재생게 라마 추바가 탈 송도 서버드레스.
And you can find these ideas in the Shunju, in the Bodhicharya Avatara by the great master Shantideva, as well as in the Lama Chupa by one of the Panchen Lamas, the Guru Puja. So you can see these ideas contained in those specific scriptures.
다 되면 또든 돈렌트레도 거스 안 타고 그 생전 다지고 되네 오천지용도 생전 다지고 등 외나비 나봐 수술 세팅 되네 파당용도 가자가 외가비 나봐 생전 다지를 보내 너와 대송냐 비상바고야 등엔도 대송냐 니지고야 어디서
And within this lineage of the mind training teachings, you'll find the practice of Tonglen, or actually giving and taking, where you imagine that there is a group of sentient beings in front of you that are undergoing various forms of suffering, and imagine that in the form of a dark light, we're able to, as we inhale, take on the suffering of those sentient beings, and we imagine that the suffering has been completely relieved in their minds. And then we imagine that from our left nostril, as we exhale, that a white light is emitted and comes out of our nose and gives all those sentient beings the happiness which they crave and desire. So this is a practice that we can do to try to make our realization of love and compassion much stronger.
So these
are the ideas that are contained within this text, and now we're actually going to get into the text itself very slowly. So the author of this particular text, The Wheel of Sharp Weapons, is an Indian pandit named Dharmarashita. And Dharmarashita was Atisha's master, or Atisha's teacher. And he was a great adept and scholar.
And he
actually wrote this text in the forest, and at the time when he was writing it, was able to subdue and be around all of the lions and tigers were all around him as he wrote this text.
And then
Atisha actually was able to give the transmission to various people, and this text was very beneficial to many beings. And if we're able to actually practice the principles within the mind training text, or within this text in particular, we're able to achieve great benefits from it. And you'll see that it's not in the English, but in the Tibetan Rinpoche, well, actually it says a Mahayana training of the mind. So this is the great scope, or the great vehicle teachings on training the mind. And here it talks about a sharp weapon. And this sharp weapon could be similar to weapons that would be used in war to defeat an enemy. But here the enemy is not an external being. The enemy is our self, or our self-cherishing attitude. So it's not in the English again, but in the Tibetan text that Rinpoche has, it begins with a homage or a prostration to the three jewels, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the reason that the text is introduced in this manner is so that author can achieve great benefits and the text will actually go well, the writing itself. So that's the reason that it's introduced in this manner, so that we can achieve the same results of the actual resultant vehicle of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. So the resultant Buddha, resultant Dharma, and resultant Sangha. So it's this reason that the text is introduced in this manner by making a prostration to those three great jewels.
어제 다드네 저우네라 보고 천차골로 셰샤와 초점 신지실라 샤철로스 저우네라 보고 천차골로 셰샤와스 저우스 제단 에너모스가 말고 다르와 당가순데 다데 나수 멘다마다 돈도나마 단르고 두죠 말스 저우네라 보고 천차골로 셰샤와데 네 조 라지반지 진진다 녀모바 동에도 나수 다르스 라진진다 녀모바 동에도 나수 너고요 알스 너고요 나수 다르스 다 로종 천차골로 녀선래발라 때네 아니 라진진다 녀모비 녀분도 그래서 엔트다 띵소다 천차골로 셰샤와 된 조점 신지시 공지지를 내주바 임바래 지지를 샤세버스.
Okay, so we begin with the text. It says, "The name of this work is the wheel of sharp weapons, effectively striking the heart of the foe. I pay heartfelt homage to you, Yamantaka. Your wrath is opposed to the great Lord of Death." So here, again, we're talking about effectively striking the heart of the foe. Who is that foe and where does that foe exist? That foe exists within us, the enemy of a self-cherishing attitude, which actually creates all of the negative results which we have in this and previous lives. So this actual teaching is to serve as an antidote to that self-cherishing attitude and destroy it so that we can obtain the great feats of the masters who have come before us.
초점의 현지시에서 초점보 안에 공 안에 예당 도진지에 녀모바드 시저바본가 본차버리 사지레스 콜롱라 가요 말스 이나야 롱라야 추두스 나워스 현지시 시 현지 남기 현지 상이 현지 현지 송요 가르스 시 현지데 되는 가서 동전나마도 저서고 저와 나기 현지도 녀모바드레스 상이 현지데 자당 롱 도자도슬레 상이 현지스 그레스 초점의 현지시에
So, and here it says, "I pay heartfelt homage to you, Yamantaka." And then when we talk about this opposition, and when we talk about this this kind of Yamantaka, there is inner, outer, and secret. And when we talk about from the tantric context, the inner, the outer, and the secret, and the actual secret deals with the channels and the various drops and so forth, whereas the the sum. Okay, okay, so the outer foe that needs to be destroyed, and the outer Yamantaka is the one that actually eradicates the various outer enemies and the harmful spirits and so forth. And the inner Yamantaka, or the inner can actually destroys the grasping itself and the self-cherishing attitude. And the purification of the secret is the actual drops and channels and winds and so forth. So this particular meaning behind this particular verse is to actually be able to serve as an antidote to this foe and destroy the foe of self-cherishing.
디지 베지 노란제 주장 바오단 차범문 주지 동에 나서 sembatsoa yins 디시 동에 당도 람바이 다미 왕기 돌아지와 yin 동에 당도 람바이 sembat데 바오도 따도 yins 다 되는 말 가지고래 다 너무 못 주잖아 말이야. 못 들어서 돈다 될로 만두나 다 답은 비거 요 말이야 비거 샤마자데 네 맥 베지테이블 가브제고 말이스 저봐 마자데 맥 베지테이블 가브제고 말이스 도게 신도솔레 마자 가브제고 말이스 도게 신도 사소나 암쿠 제부 용과르스 암쿠 로나드 제부 차 용과르스 마자 아네 맥이 베지테이블 두사바이나 그 수불 초고요 말이스.
So I'm just going to start by reading. Rinpoche read through a few verses. So in the jungles of poisonous plants strut the peacocks. Though medicine gardens of beauty lie near, the masses of peacocks do not find gardens pleasant, but thrive on the essence of poisonous plants. In a similar fashion, the brave bodhisattvas remain in the jungle of worldly concern, no matter how joyful this world's pleasure gardens. These brave ones are never attracted to pleasures, but thrive in the jungle of suffering and pain. We spend our whole life in search for enjoyment, yet tremble with fear at the mere thought of pain. Thus, since we are cowards, we are miserable still. But the brave bodhisattvas accept suffering gladly and gain from their courage a true lasting joy. In the first stanza here, it says, "In the jungle of poisonous plants struck the peacocks, though medicine gardens of beauty lie near." When we look at the animal, the peacocks actually do not enjoy eating various vegetables and good foods and so forth. They eat poisonous plants, and it's based on eating this poison that their feathers become even more beautiful and that the colors are able to be very stark and amazing. And the poison itself is actually very beneficial for the peacock. So this is the meaning behind this particular sentence here.
어제不得나지 이거 제목으로와不得나지 안에 상주선바 상주 하이 상주선바도서 되네 코즈 답이신거 더와진다 어떤게 표현은 코즈 지부요르스 이내 상주 구분도 벌시고 타림 부차도 거르스 근데 코즈 더와들 코즈 가버지고 말스 되네 코즈 가르시고래 안에 동해민의 통사 안가준 자mel이 남도 된들래 동해 요사들래 아니 상주 생바서 지부요르스 가르스나 동해민의 통야 안주고 고야 르도 노야 용도 상주 생바줄래 난주고 상바 시치고 용거르스 love compassion but this is high.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, and this is an example that you can run a parallel with the actual bodhisattvas. The bodhisattvas have the ability to be born and live in pure lands such as Dewa Chen and so forth, but they do not choose to, because by staying in those various pure lands, it makes it so that liberation or the Buddhahood is very far away, because they don't have the ability to experience the sufferings and develop various realizations within their minds that are necessary to achieve Buddhahood. So the bodhisattvas actually make aspirational prayers to be born into our realm, into the human being realm, because they're able to see various types of suffering. They're able to hear about the various sufferings. And it's based on that object of observation of the eyes and the ears and the senses that the bodhisattvas can actually strengthen their renunciation and strengthen their compassion and love and strengthen their bodhicitta. And so they would not have the ability to experience these various sufferings if they were staying in a pure land, because those kinds of sufferings are non-existent in that particular realm, so they don't have the opportunity to see them. So they actually make aspirational prayers to be born into realms of suffering so that they can develop the realizations that are necessary for them to achieve their ultimate goals.
어제 다상주 생바서 동해 요사기 사찰을 요는 구조 내주고 상바다 희제다 상주 생다 돈이도 비셔도 시체부 차용도 뉴모바다 시제번 주분지는 거스 근데 고바시고 거스.
And what is the great need for them to develop these realizations? The stronger that a bodhisattva's love and compassion and correct realization of the wisdom that without, let me start that over. The greater the understanding of love, and the greater the understanding of compassion, and the greater understanding of the wisdom that realizes emptiness that a bodhisattva possesses, the stronger the ability of those actual mind states are to eradicate the afflictions and the obstructions, afflictive obstructions, and the obstructions to omniscience, which block them from their ultimate goals.
Tene nga zu nyomolun de chas ji yoris, kondru ji yoris, temu son, da nyomong zu de do son de chaji, kondru ji, temu son de, da shangju senpa la pashin tibi shangju senpa dan, han shangju senpa ni yoris, pashin tibi shangju senpa zuge, de cha de peji, che du nye na pongo yo maris, de cha ji ji yoris, de cha peji ji yoris, yos. Ne kondru dan, temu de peji pashin tibi shangju senpa ge peji je tugo maris. Da han ge shangju senpa yorowa, dege kondru dan, temu do songa peji je ne, ane peji je ne, lang drusu je tugo maris, have path. Yeah.
And when we look in the divisions of bodhisattvas, we can see that there are bodhisattvas in the perfection vehicle and bodhisattvas in the secret vehicle or the tantric vehicle. And the bodhisattvas in the actual perfection vehicle or the Sutrayana bodhisattvas, we can see that they are able to use attachment, the three poisons of attachment, hatred, and delusion. Those three poisons can be utilized in their complete sense only by the beings who are practicing the actual esoteric or tantrayana path. So the bodhisattvas who are on the path of the perfection vehicle can use attachment in some degree as a path, and they can convert that into something positive, but the anger and delusion cannot be converted. Whereas in the tantrayana vehicle, all three of those poisons can be converted into something positive and turned into a path by a great bodhisattva.
Wa dendeji peje yonggo se da de cha de peje je ne de cha de lang ge zhubu cha ne an lang go xie chen zhu xia wo de ha ge doba zu ge kong zhu peje je ne ane kong zhu de lang zhu xie ne lang de xie chen zhu ya de mo peje je ne lang xie chen zhu ya ba na nga so me chu chung ji ba ba yin na long chu se lang xie de de xie na che wul me che ben ba yong de long ga ze xie che wa zu ge mo xie chen zhu de da ba yin sa.
And when attachment is used and converted into a positive path, it's a very powerful path. And just imagine if also the emotions of anger and the emotions of delusion, how strong they are, if those ideas could be converted from their negative aspects into positive aspects and converted into a path, it would be very powerful. It's as if there's a fire burning, and this fire that's burning is very small and is able to be blown out very easily by the wind. But if there is a large amount of fire burning, the wind itself actually aids the fire and actually makes the fire burn stronger. So it's like this, that using these actual delusions or these negative mind states for positive things, that we can convert them into paths.
Wa dendeji dena ne su dendeji le de waras na nga zo ba cha dol zero nas.
So that's the kind of general meaning in these first couple stanzas.
Ta ne zhen du na su ma ja jo na me ji dong ra le ban ze ju jang ma ji zu na ga ma ju jis zhen du na su ane pozen ka su go tree zu go ba zhen du na su sha ma ja de ane dogi na se sul chimba ina ane ku dol ga ba ji ne me ji dong ra le ban ze ju jang ma ja dan ga ma ju jis ane me ge
So in the jungles of poisonous plants strut the peacocks. Though medicine gardens of beauty lie near, the masses of peacocks do not find gardens pleasant, but thrive on the essence of poisonous plants. So again, that's the meaning of that, is that these peacocks actually eat the poison and eat the poisonous plants and use them as something that benefits and is beneficial to them based on the explanation that I just gave. And there are actual medicine gardens or gardens or plants that are not poisonous that are near them, but they don't actually eat those, and they choose to eat the poisonous plants because they can be converted into something that's much better for them than the actual medicinal plant.
Oje tadne maji tuna ga majuji zendu juji maja tsuwa dar bawu ku na su juba na deji peji donran zeju jang pawo tan chaba munju jis dongen nasu semba soa yins ta maja ge doge shin de sena ane maja de jibu cha ne ronaldon zebu cha yongro was but de na jin pawo ku shangchu semba pawo ku nasu juba na deji peji ne shangchu semba zo ne deji dil gabaje go mars happiness no like
Hakosan.
deji peji donran zeju jangs 보우다네 보우상주 사바다네 아니 도와들에 차고요 말이스 차바 문주지 동에 나서 semba 소아인스 동에 요사들에 상주 semba시라고 지부요 말이스
So here it says, in a similar fashion, the brave bodhisattvas, or the hero bodhisattvas, remain in the jungle of worldly concern. No matter how joyful this world's pleasure gardens, these brave ones are never attracted to pleasures, but thrive in the jungle of suffering and pain. This stanza was explained before about the bodhisattvas who do not wish to be in environments that are always pleasant and have to be surrounded by pleasant activities at all times. Bodhisattvas actually can convert all of these sufferings into a path, and based on their using these sufferings as an object of observation, can develop stronger realizations within their minds. So the bodhisattvas don't wish to be attracted to these pleasures, are not attracted to these pleasures, and do not wish to go to these world's pleasure gardens because they cannot really help them, and it doesn't really aid their realization. So the bodhisattvas choose to be surrounded by suffering and be surrounded by various types of pain because they can then use them as an object of observation to develop stronger realizations of their compassion, love, and so forth.
Oh yeah, that dane diji dando lamba yi damion ge dola jeba yins. Ane shangju semba zu karjin dwal chagoyo maris. Dungel gabaje go haris. Shangju semba zo ane dwal gabu majiba karje versna. Dwal gabaje na dwal chabaje tiyo khonruche ngajeje lesane khoal kone dungel leung go haris. Tin sonson shangju semba zo dijil gabaje go maris.
So we spend our whole life in search for enjoyment, yet we tremble with fear at the mere thought of pain. Thus, since we are cowards, we are miserable still. But the brave bodhisattvas accept suffering gladly and gain from their courage a lasting joy. It's based on our grasping for enjoyments and our search for pleasure that we run around needlessly to chase after things which are not helpful. And the bodhisattvas realize this and realize that the pride and jealousy and attachments and so forth will only produce various types of suffering. So it is not helpful for them. So they accept the various forms of suffering gladly because they can convert those sufferings into a lasting path and to something which will actually produce lasting joy or their final goal of enlightenment. So the meaning behind this is that they accept suffering gladly and gain from their courage a true lasting joy. So their courageous activities, which their courage allows them to endure various types of suffering, to have to be born into places where there are suffering, is an antidote to the various six realms and an antidote for their rebirth into cyclic existence again and again and again, as we have been, based upon our self-cherishing attitude and our search for only enjoyment.
Ta shangchu semba zo tkasa dongen tang donlen bi semba de pau ta ji ta jo yins ane shangchu semba zo dongen garjin gabje waris dongen ma bong ba ji dongen yosa de garjin gabje waris na ane shangchu semba dongen mi gu anju ko ya le tour yong de ane ko ngen yong samba da yen le ni je shamba doni du bi shero du she che yong waris de yin so da ane 뒤따도 지분 거를 사지 고봉 용거를 타버도 거를 하다 매 대선 레벨 대 용거 여다 안 동el 가지 되스.
So when it sounds a little bit strange, we might say that the bodhisattvas accept suffering gladly. The bodhisattvas do not wish to have suffering. They absolutely do not. But they realize that these various forms of suffering, and seeing these sufferings and hearing about sufferings and realizing that these sufferings exist, and actually strengthen their idea of renunciation and strengthen their love and strengthen their compassion. And because the bodhisattvas are the great practitioners, realize that as soon as these are strengthened and as soon as we can truly develop these minds, then Buddhahood is completely within reach. So bodhisattvas endure this suffering for now so that they may achieve their ultimate goals of Buddhahood based on the realizations that they will acquire, based on the realizations that they will obtain relative to the sufferings that they are able to witness and so forth.
So this
is the meaning behind that bodhisattvas enjoy or accept. In the Tibetan is a little different. The bodhisattvas enjoy suffering. This is the reasoning behind that. Just to let people know, translators note, the English is a lot of poetic license in here. So the Tibetan literally says enjoys suffering. So. And please tell me if the teaching that I'm giving, it says something different in the English text.
Dama sharu tabi sula ches tanderes docha de zendu ga natan rawares docha de ne zendu tu ramores ne docha de ane shangju samba zu ge beje je ba yina ane phentu je bu yong wares shangju samba zu ge docha beje je ane kholu jabo de je botung la zu ba tu saje go bon tu Pentul Rugares Marbe.
The massage. Okay.
Thunder Carlos. Thunder and Docha Zendu Nathan Marbe.
Now desire is the jungle of poisonous plants here. Only brave ones like peacocks can thrive on such fare. If cowardly poisons like crows were to try it, because they are greedy, they might lose their lives. The meaning behind this is that if crows were to try to eat the same kind of food that a peacock is eating, the crow would surely die. And it's likewise, bodhisattvas who have high realizations are really the only types of beings who can use and convert these negative emotions into positive paths. So we have to realize that the bodhisattvas have high realizations, and it's based on those high realizations that they can convert attachment and so forth into an actual path. Whereas if ordinary beings were to try to do so, they would inevitably not be able to convert it into a path. So the bodhisattvas, using these various afflictions or using these various negative emotions, are able to obtain unsurpassable complete enlightenment and able to obtain extremely high realizations based on this conversion.
Oji tatene shangchu samba bana ngodu jendang sota karso sheshin ndo to zole mari badan tayu dubi bala nyen ponki doba da sibi saban ma inde sanjin de sibi jolen be shangchu samba zogi kondu dan sudra shangchu samba yorwa to zogi kondu to zogi pongres docha bongo mar ku gül jen beje jegres ane sanjin de sibi jolen kholuju jabola suba potong la suba che ane lang trobo sugorwa docha beje jebala dene shangchu ge sen dan lang do ya chen ro ya gores marbe.
And you can see that in the Sutrayana vehicle, or the Great Perfection vehicle, you can find a quote in the Abhisama Alamkara about this particular quote, this particular stanza, where it says that the bodhisattvas are able to use desire to eradicate their ignorance, but they should always not engage in activities of anger and delusion. So you can find this quote in the Abhisama Alamkara and various other Suchayana teachings, where, as we said before, in the great vehicle path, the two kinds of bodhisattvas, the great vehicle bodhisattvas only use one of the three poisons to convert into a path. And you can find that quotation in the Abhisama Alankara.
어제 다드네 장주 선바 적은 저자 베제 제기나 편도 저거스 랑야 시천 저거스 장주 선바 매바라 진진 요견 속에 저자 베제 제바이나 내솔마산 동행 요거스
And that if the bodhisattva has high realizations, then he or she is able to convert this attachment into a great path and convert it into very high realizations. But ordinary beings who have this self-grasping, this self-cherishing attitude still, when they try to use attachment as a path, will inevitably be reborn into the lower realms and the hells and so forth.
어제 다드네 마자 되게 도사나 그 편도 집은 도와스 샤루 도사송의 신의 도와스 샤루 나도 샤루라버스 라진지 시시고 와르스 도사 비주 제가 지나 어디용거 레사네 동행 용거 레제버다.
And so we can see here that peacocks are able to eat this poison, and crows, as soon as they begin to eat this poison, will absolutely die from it. We're like the crows. We're like the crows who, can't eat this poison and can't really afford to try these things out. Because if we have this self-cherishing attitude and we have these principles of grasping within our mind still, then our attachment, if we try to use that as a path, will just breed more attachment and will just turn into a path to the lower realms.
Dhamma sharu tabi sula chese ngatsu tabi lawu aris rang jinjin yoken tsuge rang jinjin yobi shangchu sen meba rang jinjin yoken tsu sharu ndabu res Dhamma sharu tabi sula chese sharu ki tu sana shenag res ten najin sharu danda yu rang jinjin jula yoken tsu ane docha bejo jeba ina ane chene dungen yung res
The Pike Kavyare, indication you, Pike Kavyare.
Dhamma sharu tabi sula chese
He's using two texts and mine's a little different then. Sulachi. Ngamar.
Damasana
And then it says, how can someone who cherishes self more than others take lust and such dangerous poisons for food? If he tried like a crow to use delusions, he would probably forfeit his chance for release. So here in the next stanza, you can see the meaning that I just explained, where it talks about ordinary beings and trying to use these various attachments and so forth for a path. So we are very similar to the crow who would die inevitably from eating these various types of poison and be reborn based on our lack of realization and use of desire, be reborn into the lower realms. And here it says, probably forfeit his chance for release.
Ranjinzi shu chebu yoken gaza dusugi ane docha gu dud bejo je tu mares rando je dula dud kana chus ranjinzi mebi shangchu samba zu ane docha bejo je na pentu chebu yoares rando je ranjinzi yoken sugi docha bejo je ba ina nyekha yoares nyu yoares.
So those who cherish self are not able to engage in these various practices. Because the bodhisattvas cherish others more than self, then they're able to use these various poisons for ordinary beings for positive results. So that's in summary, the bodhisattvas, based on their realization and based on their other cherishing attitude, are able to convert these negative factors or poisons into a path, whereas ordinary beings who cherish themselves are not able to do so. And if they try to do that, will inevitably be reborn into the lower realms.
我觉得的呢，牛木间当，那木间当这些家伙那是牛木间当，留下的那个这些差不多哇，但留下那个这些杂堆，他空着当，等木来等着不下午的是。
So we've already talked about the poison of attachment, and similarly, the poison of anger and the poison of delusion is used by those who have the highest realization.
他空着白酒间呢，偏头有看的，呢，哈当的这个上就三把么子卡不的是，哈把上就三把做个，但呢，空着的白酒间呢，搞出过来，呢。大些就汤这物事，就这样的就汤有的是，长期有嘛的，区有嘛的，跟你有嘛的事情，等着用过的话，但呢，想就先把这个现金归那浪的谁说呢？这话是我这是我们的控制被就结果的，控制被就结果了，但呢，想就个三当，现金当都是要写清楚的是，看不个上就什么。
So if a bodhisattva is not a tantric practitioner and not highly realized, using anger or hatred or using delusion for a path would be almost impossible. But the highly realized ones can use that anger and turn it towards the eradicating the idea that grasps at true existence, the idea that disbelieves the law of cause and effect, the idea that is imbued with ignorance, the idea that does not believe in the origins of suffering, does not believe in the past, does not believe in all of these other things. So a highly realized being can turn this anger towards these various ignorances and use it as a means to eradicate those negative factors. So that anger could then serve as an antidote for ignorance.
我的呢，他的呢，发现提拔人呢，那告诉我，代表年纪轻什么的呗？代表年纪轻，我们下家们的不大给叫我们进来，代表年纪轻是给中国的吧，上出生吧，那空主人中国嘛的呗，我家的样多了，主人轻，那没拿不动可看这个，会上路了，我家跟个谁？那可家拉跟可结果上把真了哇，代表年纪轻可能年纪了的，可我家谁吧？那我家谁地巴这个，可你话对个军人们用过这个是，但得嘞，俺可谁下吧？那可几谁比对个的俺用那个么都是可能年纪呢，可谁下吧？对，说那么不是按照的是。
And we can't be mistaken when we read some of these previous life stories of Buddha. There was once Buddha in one of his previous lives where he was a riverboat captain, and there he was the head of the boat, and there were 500 passengers on the riverboat. And Buddha, through his clairvoyance and understanding, realized that this one of the people on the boat was going to murder everybody else on the ship and then take all of their things and take the boat. So Buddha, through his compassion, not through any other negative emotion, actually killed this one person to save the other 499, and also to save that person who was going to commit the murder from the karma of murdering. So this is a practice that could only be done by someone extremely realized, and it would have to be done with the right motivation. So we need to be careful when we read some of these stories and not mistake their meaning.
But then the passion division choose somebody else. But then I think Haba Tsugi and then Sanji Temple Nobody, Legend Mabba talking, what then the Doja then the Yobaina, and then Hag Tune, Chisea Jiggy, Chisondu Waters. This Congress Pejabala Dene and Long Shachan Ruya Waters.
And then this is in the Sutrayana vehicle where you see this talk of compassion. And there's much more wrathful explanations when you get to the Tantrayana path. Much more wrath involved and much more idea of using this anger and this heated emotion to destroy the negativities within our grasping itself and so forth. So there's a much more wrathful talk in the Vajrayana path about this, using these negative emotions and converting them into a path.
Then as well charge Ralo Tawas, Jiji Juba, Ralo Tene Bibulchi, Jiji Nujuba, Jiji and the Wanshu, Jiji to Gone, anko böl fevares ra lo zawa tene dinghele maba pesavares soan duba do to sukal nge böl lesavares tene ralo ge jiji jud ke ngoro jiji yamadaga ke yondi tene mabe se tamando do khatang wares chono ge yidang de amares gol tonru ga gujeres chono lama de laba yo mares wadin khatang wares anna ralo kulong shane shanchu samba judin juji se jawares kan to jan
Ralo Sawa. Shanchu Sema Gatsid saison.
judin juji se wares
Judun.
judin juji beje se wares böl
Judun 17.
ha ge wode te je woro da
Then a Yanja Surlong. The Anja Gomasong Yama. The Sarpa. Ralo Sawa.
ralo zawaro
Ralo Sawa. Shanchu Sema Judun. Sesa.
ralo zawa kon jiji ge ne ju baro jiji yametaga biyune sante de kitune böl khem ge ralo zawa kon biyul simro biyune anko bar chadons laba me ge jiji ne ju ba ju an kon jiji to ba to jiji kunul jiji wa shu an jiji ge de sukngalo nyane je ne anko che to ba le injiro an böl le ondu jiji de yon chu ma ga da ma ba to 저는 지지 두자레스 슈리비 슈레스 뭐 이런 걸라고 용해는 가워요 왔을 때 별게 용 주고 말했어 되는라고 동그다
Oh, okay. There's a story in the past of Ralo Tsawa, who was an emanation of Yamantaka, who came to Tibet to give some of the various initiations and teachings on the Yamantaka vehicle. And when he got to Tibet, he was met by Marpa, one practitioner, Marpa. Yes, or one of the children of Marpa. It's unclear as to it was either Marpa or one of Marpa's children. And they said, "This you don't have any arms and you have horns. You're an animal, and you are not really teaching Buddhism. And this is not something that we want into Tibet. We don't want these teachings because it's a non-Buddhist lineage that you're trying to pass off as Buddhism." And then in this particular story, the Yamantaka was able, through all of these wrathful powers, to get rid of some of the people who were against this, so that the teachings could stay pure and this lineage could kind of move on.
What the Kondo Bejiad, what the Tendri Bejibala Dene, Kondo Lango Dushene, Nijidan, Shambatan, Shanjuka Senda.
So it's by using anger and converting it into love and love, compassion, and the special mind and the mind that aspires to Buddhahood can be created.
What the Nyomu Jendan, Tiji Javanas, Nyomu Jenda, Docha Najin Kondodan, and the Mutusule, the Najin Jas.
So here it says, and thus bodhisattvas are likened to peacocks. They live on delusions, those poisonous plants, transforming them into the essence of practice. So that's what we're talking about here. It's using those delusions and using those various poisons, which would normally cause large amounts of suffering, and turning them into something positive and making them the essence of the practice.
Sharu tabi sula boss, Ranjin Shuchabi Yogansoge, Contradan, the Mobejo Jebaina, and the Shene Dogan Yungres, Shanchuga Sen, and the Shanchuga Sen Dankashugare, Dang Hagan Yalet and the Shishabi Yobaina, the name Yomotu Bejo Jene, and Yomu Mabazu Tugres.
In the last few lines, they thrive in the jungle of everyday life. Whatever is presented, they always accept while destroying the poison of clinging desire. So we ordinary beings, when we talk about the three poisons, we talk about attachment, hatred, and desire. Usually those various poisons are called poison because they give rise to sufferings in the future in some form or another. And here, when the bodhisattvas in the Vajrayana vehicle are able to understand those delusions, they can be converted into something very positive, become the essence of a practice, and can be used in everyday life as an actual antidote, and used as a path to be converted into a cause for actual Buddhahood.
what the is that then ma de le laboris, or the catu the hard and the rabundus.
Yeah, and this is when explained like this, it can be kind of easy to understand. But these particular quotations are more in the tantric context. And you can see that there is you can put the Tantra and Sutra teachings together, and the two of them can exist together and not be contradictory.
Semba maja tabo yi to the na tan da yu nyomona judo jola ku na sunju tan do lan la to de jon jas maja tabi shan chu semba do kha ge shan chu semba chu ge an de sha dan kondro dan ane to su nga pe ju je ne ane de sha dan kondro nga me ba zu gres marbe tiji semba maja tabo yi to gi na tan da yu nyomona judo jola sa Pejene, long trusu juguris, long tru causes trusu jula, Ku Nasunju, Tantolan la, Nyomo Tantolan la, Nyomo Vitu de Juan, Pongres, Pontogres.
So, uncontrollable wandering through rounds of existence is caused by our grasping at egos as real. The ignorant attitude heralds the demon of selfish concern of our welfare alone. We seek some security for our own egos. We want only pleasure and shun only pain. But now we must banish all selfish compulsion and gladly take hardship for all others' sake. So here, this is talking about abandoning the grasping itself, which actually causes all of these other negativities and causes us to be born again and again into cyclic existence and into this negative state of rebirth. So that's the general meaning behind this, and we'll explain it more thoroughly in a moment.
Koa yi dadun ziba duji panyande randu jindu dedan pate ne jendun kaji dandu langwa shas dan rang bas ane nga su koa lu ku ne dunga ji dunga dan yu dunga dan chaban duji ji dunga tu ngalo ane nga su ndogo yo maride rangwa yo maris dunga ji le ngore dunga ji dunga le ngore le ngore rang me ba dunga nyu du goya de rang jinjin dege ane nga su des jing du yoris da rang jinjin pha ja ne yin jinjin jang le ji gore sa ji go da le du gore.
Okay, so here we're talking about this uncontrollable wandering through the rounds of cyclic existence. And it seems that we have no independence whatsoever. We're being forced by our karma and afflictions into various realms and into various rebirth. And it seems like it's completely out of our control. And it's based on our self-cherishing attitude. Basically, it's as though we are tied and bound into this cycle of cyclic existence by our self-cherishing attitude, which produces all of these negative graspings and so forth. So this is the reason that we have to endure these various sufferings. And the goal of these particular teachings is to release us from that bondage.
Ranjin Pajagures, Jendun Kaji, Tantolangas, Jendun Jensen Tanji, Janju, Sanguya, and then Shambaguya, Hijaguya, or to Sukal College of Waters, Lodukawa, Sanjig Lodukawa Jebanaji, Jensen, Nyasolan, Kawajagures.
So, and then it's to convert this idea, once again, of this self-cherishing attitude to an attitude that really truly cherishes others and thinks about others and wants to take care of others. And it's based on that we're able to achieve the feats that we read about and hear about in various teachings in Scripture.
Daga din to lawa sha sirwa legend de nyomo gomba yi retun chego yonji to ngena jindo dagi din to lawa sha as da retun kar so gore madan ladan ka sisran so marbe senjubi dongen galo anne suzuki jindo ran jinjin ki selang waris donle jin selang bad marbe.
So here it says, all of our sufferings derive from our habits of selfish delusions we heed and act out. As all of us share in this tragic misfortune, which stems from our narrow and self-centered ways, we must take all our sufferings and the misery of others and smother our wishes of selfish concern. This particular stanza is talking about the practice of tonglen, or giving and taking, and imagining that there are various sentient beings in front of us who are suffering, and imagining that from that group of people, we take in the form of a dark light into our right nostril all of their sufferings on and completely remove them from them. So that's the meaning behind this.
Kete randu tewa shubise, kete randu tewa shubise dola, rangi deji nrola jin, rangi deji nrola jin, rangi deji kan, kete randu tewa shubise dolas, ta sosoke rang jenzin de she chebu chomba ina, ena rang jenzin de pa ka gur, do gures, rang jenzin de ja gures, rang jenzin de ja ne, rangi deji, ane soso chewa thoma meban tati bata saashabi gawa tusu ngalo o bhata bata nakondo yo gabi naba ane senjen tangji la pu ne senjen tangji dawa tan den sung nyabe shamba gongya tongwa maribe.
Should the impulse arise now to seek our own pleasure, we must turn it aside to please others instead. For even if loved ones should rise up against us, we must blame our self-interest and feel that it's our due. So this part, we can imagine that all sentient beings are in front of us, and in the form of a white light or a clear, very bright light from our left nostril, we emit various rays of happiness that give all sorts of happiness to the beings who are in front of us that are suffering. And this acts as an antidote to this self-cherishing attitude, because it's an attitude that wishes for others to have happiness.
LoJong
So in these two stanzas in the mind training context, the practice of giving and taking is very important, and we can strengthen our realizations of love and compassion by doing this practice.
Chetara dala kuji lodu tses, chetara pana dala kuji lodu tse, ane susuki loma yinande, susuki bugu yinande, susuki tobo yinande, kare yina, ane susuliya ngolo jaa namu, kote sigurbe, ngolo na jaba yina, ane te ju karali tene shungwares, kampana sigurbe, cause ju karali tene shungwares na, kete Chedaras pana dala kuji luru tse rangi in laje hinsin dins ane kugi ne susulaya loba druba tene jongsuna ngolo jaba tene jongsuna te jokala tene shungwa resina ane susuku chwe maji baji nayi jen dusi dede ya tekin rebures nayi inwa chwe maji baji inwa nayi se ura
Nayi don't go right.
nayi se na chwe dang tende sanda matang daga lule chi dede ya chwe mara dosu chula dang
Lelo.
lelo se kumara tende abure nayi.
So here it says, for even if loved ones should rise up against us, we must blame our self-interest and feel it's our due. We have to realize that whenever our friends or our brothers and sisters, loved ones of any kind, that we feel that in the past we've done great things for, and they suddenly rise up against us, or we have problems with them, we have to look at what the cause of this truly is. And we have to think about this. And when we have a very thorough understanding of cause and effect, we'll understand that this was based on our grasping itself and previously, and it's just an effect that's ripening because the conditions are present. So we have to realize this and realize that in the past we've been very lazy and been very complacent and haven't really done the practices and that would actually get rid of this self-interest and actually purify these negative things which are now rising into our lives. So we have to understand that when these things happen, they come from a cause.
what the this way. That Lula, Mazu, Nasa Shon, it's Lula, Mazu, Nasa Shon, it's Lula, never Jewayi, Lengan Rala Koi, Tane, Nasa Malu, Rala Lance, that and Suzu Zubul TV Nasa, Kesig Nasa, and then Damada Kambachaya, Gochaya, and then Chunchatea. Dunga moving words, Dunga Duade, Jukala Ten Shonresana, and then up to Joe Namana, Kamale, Jandal Panova Jim Debut, Seco Waters, Seco Lengon Sanjaran Waters, Zuku Waters, Lengon Sanjaran Coains, Tane, Nasa Malu Tantolans, Nasa Karishova Inaya, Tantolan, Tone Gosgureta, Dunga Tanlang Waters. Tangarung Jewari Matu, Kuchivan Arungi, Ling and Basavijan, Nova Jibi, David Narung Kuan, what the Tonlang was Sukumendo, Dungetan language.
When our bodies are aching and racked with great torment of dreadful diseases we cannot endure, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us for wrongs we have done. Till now we have injured the bodies of others. Hereafter, let's take on what sickness is theirs. So first of all, going to the last line, it says, let's take on what sickness is theirs. When we have these various sufferings and so forth, we could actually be happy that if we are engaging in the practice of giving and taking, and we imagine that we're taking on these sufferings and taking on these sicknesses, we can imagine as though it's actually happened, and imagine that our practice of giving and taking has actually produced results. So that's one thing. We have to realize that these dreadful diseases of TB and of cancers and all these other diseases which can come to us as human beings because we have this body are coming to us because of the fact that we've done various wrongs in the past, and we've harmed others in the past, whether it was last week or many years or lifetimes ago. We've created the cause for this particular suffering to come to us, and we have harmed others, and we have done things that did not please others, and it's because of this that we are now experiencing these various diseases and sufferings. So an antidote for this again is practicing the giving and taking practice, the giving and taking, and imagining that we're taking on the sickness of others while we too are enduring this pain.
Yana Dungan Tandolan and Denison and Digo, Dungan, Jedna Dungan, the Shida Dujaris, the Missing Dujaris, Nasul no wars, Yen no wars, Ina Dungan, Teni wars, Dungan, the Shonsona, and then Nanjung Samba Jagaris, Yaburis, and then Jendal Hiji Junguris, Dungan, Chona, and then Pendu Chivundus, Masu Julan Nanjung Samba Jungu, Jela Hiji Jagundus.
And usually when we think about suffering or we think about these kinds of things, it's not a positive idea. It's usually a very negative idea that comes into our mind when we think of suffering in general. But if we really analyze suffering, we can see that suffering serves as a jump-off point for us and actually gives us a reason to develop renunciation. Suffering gives us a reason to develop these ideas of compassion, love, bodhicitta, and so forth. So it's these kinds of suffering that act as objects of observation for us to produce the realizations that we must in order to obtain our goals. So there are those two positive things we can posit about suffering.
And you see
that bodhisattvas are able to endure various sufferings and gladly take them on and actually make offerings of their bodies, are willing to give away their very bodies and endure very large amounts of hardships for the sake of their goals.
And Junen de then the big Sajil Tamil Luji, what does Galo, then they go be on Kishima in Jero, Tamil Luji, Sanjik Joangama, Jig, and the big Sajil.
And you can see this story, the previous life stories of Buddha Shakyamuni, the great conqueror. In his previous lives, he actually gave tiger babies his body and cut pieces of his flesh off to a starving group of cubs.
And
it's very similar to this, the meaning of that.
ngaba yenji senju dubai lengen sonja ran la ko tane de ngema le ran la lance tane sa rangi sen la dongen shun se ane susu sen ma ji ba ji sen dongen de shun ba yina ane te jokan la tene shun wa resna ane jiwa ngama nga su sen yen senju duba la tene debute se ko yores nga su senju duba gore te yin so sa dongen ngalo nga su ta lang gores.
So, depressed and forlorn, when we feel mental anguish, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning, full circle upon us for wrongs we have done. Till now we have deeply disturbed the minds of others. Hereafter, let's take on this suffering ourselves. Again, when we start to get depressed or have our mind is in a place that isn't very pleasant, we can attribute that to the fact that in previous times we disturbed others' minds, and now it has come around to us as the law of cause and effect always does, and now we're having to experience an unpleasant mind ourselves based on the harm we have done others.
다도 nga zu 소소리 안 메제 다서 nga senji bu mundu slo de mundu was wo de yondu wo de san dan ya mundu was 소소리 세마 지바 용도 장장
같이
아니 현다 세마 지바 용고로 현다 드르게 당가 sen지부 문두 라겐도 was 워 sen지부 세마 지바 드르 종와 있는도 수냐래 전에 하도 was.
So when we really analyze this and we are in a place in our lives where we're depressed or our minds are not feeling very good, we can also realize this fact and realize that it's coming from somewhere and that we actually harmed others in the past. And then we can begin to think about there are many others who also have this feeling and also have a very depressed mind based on based on their actions. So maybe we could think of a way that we can take on the suffering of others and take it onto ourselves, and imagine that as our minds are sad, that maybe we've taken a little bit of the sadness away from others, and we can convert that into something positive.
다드네 ngazo 카고야 두고도야 서고마르베 투리스티 아니 카고야 두고로와 자비서와나 아니 대조kon라데네 쇼와레스나 두고도야다 카고야 그동에 용고야데 조kon라데네 쇼와레스나 아니 테단스 아니 저가마 말 테데안도 답나 ngazo 아마라갈 찾아반 주도 내가 지게 졸래 테랭도 테 테스트르베 지 무이갈 지len도도 용고야len도 test te yendal te duslen tene yenda goma koya jala thoya sana jeba sana tene jebe dela tene so ka koya da dogo toya de yongo waris legi chonja dan lo koyo waris tane te goma le ba dan lang waris tane go
when hunger or violent thirst overwhelms us, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us for wrongs we have done. Till now we have kept what we had without sharing. We have plundered and stolen and lured on people on. Hereafter, let's take from them hunger and thirst. So here, we realize that right now we might be very hungry or we might be very thirsty, but previously we have engaged in various types of activities based on our greed, overtaxing people. I guess in the Tibetan there's something about overtaxing people, and stealing from people and lured people on so that we could gain some sort of benefit from it. So this is now ripened on into our lives and ripened into this suffering of hunger and a violent thirst. So in the future, if we really realize these things, let's figure out a way that we can take away hunger and thirst from others so that we do not have to experience these results in the future again.
So
if we can think and really apply these things into our lives, it would be very good.
yen go yobu je ya na an ji gar su gore yen go on me ba on su de ju ma re ba ro ba ro me ba yen ji ku shin na yu tsis ba na zhong han de de zu gan ro yo ma ro ba ku zhong na ga sha yo ro ba an 전바 되게 병부터 갈라 봐이나 내가 제선은 내가 제고래 가르제나 어떤 게 뇨돼야죠 말이야. 정화 매발 쿠시나 있스. 되나 아직 동에 몸이 용거로 와. 동에 도서 그걸로 죽간라 되는 쇼어에서나 매라 당신은 소소를 줘 생전 도서 당화지 도자지. 아니 옌을 유복고야. 아니 매jen을 유복고야 근데 버레스 저항만 레사ben 데부데 장로 코용어레스 랭에 조저랑로 대인 소자 대답이 동해가 다도랑 거르서 말이야.
So when we lack any freedom but must obey others, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us for wrongs we have done. Till now we have looked down upon those who are lowly, used them as servants for our own selfish needs. Hereafter let's offer our service to others with humble devotion of body and life. So in the past, we might have engaged in activities where we actually jailed people or took away their freedom and looked down upon them and used others for our own needs and benefits and used them as servants and did not allow them to have any freedom and various other factors and various other things that we engaged in to take away the freedoms of others. So now, if we do not wish to experience these things in the future or experience them again, we have to offer service to others. And that service serves as an antidote to this particular negative emotion or negative imprint within our minds that will then not allow us to have to endure these sufferings again and not allow us to have this lack of freedom again.
소소 yenga yobuji, yenga shambaji, yenga mensa zung, watan jiya keche buris. Mensa zung na jesa yins, yenga yobuji dana jena soso tondru guris.
So, if we really want to produce the results in the future that are positive, and we really wish to not be bound or not have the freedom, then we must engage in service to others, and we must put others before ourselves, and we must really be extremely humble around others and imagine that others are much higher status than we are, and cherish them and take care of them and provide them with the things that they need.
아니 LoJong 제제 말 된도와 가도 수단 주비세 다니 그 메다신 젠라 상바 타바이 주도 제반 셈보슈스 가자 수단 주비세 아니 소소 메사 종고레스 아니 젠다가 추다고 그래서 어떤 답인사.
And you can see the quote in the 8 verses for mind training that says, whenever I associate with others, I will look of myself as the lowest amongst all and respectively hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. So you can see this quote in the 8 verses of mind training that really talks about the meaning of this stanza here. So again, it's whenever I associate with others, I will look at myself as the lowest amongst all and respectively hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart.
다드네 메녜치나 나와 쇼와나 타말라수 나기 노바이 레네소저랑라 고와이 다는 나기 균람 해봐샤스 다 가서 안줄 도자 고야요로 계정에 받던 안줄 고야요로 계정에 안줄 도자고 아니 세마지바 차도로 생여바 도자 안줄 고대야 돼 가르근 데버서나 저항하마 타마시야게 나기 녀바지요 말에 준래 타마 디바이스 비지르바 어때 젤 타마시비도와 타마시빌랭에 그 손자들랑 놓고네 안줄 도자고도 와르스 롱에 손자 나한테 타말라서 나게 노바나 랭에 손자랑 놓고와이 다네 레기 콜로데랑 놓고 와르스 나 랭에 손자들랑 놓고 안소서 안줄 도자고도 와르스 다네 나게 쭌람 해봐샤스
So when we hear only language that is foul and abrasive, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now we have said many things without thinking. We have slandered and caused many friendships to end. Hereafter, let's censor all thoughtless remarks. So it's whenever we hear language, we hear cursing, we hear very abrasive sounds to our ears, or people saying negative things about us. This is is absolutely the effect of us engaging in these things in the past and us not being mindful, basically, and not thinking before we talk in the past. So we've engaged in the various negative actions of our speech, of lying and useless talk, divisive speech, harsh words. We've engaged in these 4 negativities of our speech, and now the wheel of sharp weapons, or karma, has come around to us, and now we have those things in our life based on the wrongs that we previously have done. So in the future, if we do not wish to have these negative words in our lives and foul language and abrasive speech, then we have to be more mindful and we have to censor ourselves. And when we're about to say something we really shouldn't say, we need to not say those things because they will only ripen again into our lives in a negative way, and we will have to hear negative words and abrasive, abusive language directed at ourselves.
So when we
are around others, we should only use pleasant words, and we should say things which will make them happy.
Nawa taba gomba yi mada tawa taba gomba yi lenge choncha rangla kuwa yi tane tanamba ji gomba shaas tane mada rawa kanya mada yudu cheba nas mada bishindo taji mayimba pyo len mayimbi ane sisu rangsu kumarbe shinkhan tu chedeba de mada bishinkhan chedeba jukarasana mada badu ngone yabare samba gombe legen rebu khune tane mada bishin shada chederis deres ta tane ngaso tabi thawa jang goris thun taba ju taba longshe taba hang den da yin ro longshe da no da longshe da ta chi ala tambu den ma ya kaya mada yud cheba na mada yud cheba sisran tu sumarbe mada shin tu cheba de
lung daba de daba indicate jason
mada shin tu cheba de karasana ana ngaroso thawa mada ba daba yin bone rebres tan daba gongurs daba daba an so desa ge thun tu galo sai je khangone yin ba ane so langone yin ba. When
we are born in oppressive and wretched conditions. This is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now, we have always had a negative outlook. We have criticized others, seeing only their flaws. Hereafter, let's cultivate positive feelings and view our surroundings as stainless and pure. Here, this last line, it is interesting. It talks about viewing our surroundings as stainless and pure. I think that this is related to the tantric teaching where we imagine that we are in a pure land, and we imagine that all of our surroundings and all of the things we use are pure, the pure speech, the pure activities, the pure palace, and we imagine that everywhere that we are is extremely pure and is uncontaminated. So this serves as an antidote to being born in these oppressive places, and not talking about the flaws of others and not criticizing is something that also serves as an antidote to us not being born in oppressive and wretched conditions. So these oppressive and wretched conditions are the current contaminated conditions that we see in the various other realms that do not have that are not pure lands, basically. So we have to realize that in order for us to create these kinds of stainless and pure environment, create stainless and pure environment in our lives, we must apply the various antidotes to the contaminated views that we have. Chishina de zanima trela dan lenja zanima.
Right. Yeah.
The Sonchana Tama.
Or yeah, okay. Then I wouldn't again, eh?
The Chichena Shiloka Chini then got to
Yeah.
Digarabe.
Okay.
Two channel chat.
Yeah. Okay. Pension that you do not take it, Yen you couldn't dagi cut on be, Lengen was a run of go, Tane, Yenda couldn't damages. Pension that you do not take this, this is Marbeta, Susu Tubu Pita Vero, and then Susu Putrobo, Pomotrobo, Pama, and then Suzuki Shidage, Putabu, Tubu to Galo, Lanza Meba Chandas Dua, the Jukan, and then Hama, Jenga Kotuzungalo, Tadujin, Mebazuagi, Lengan Sujaran Kuyumaris, Tane, Jengi Kodan, the Subaru Juji John Jeju Maris.
Two channel. When we are parted from friends and from those who can help us, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now we have taken the friends and good servants of others away, wanting them for ourselves. Hereafter let's never cause close friends to part. So this is when, whether it's our girlfriend or boyfriend or, this is just friend in the normal sense, not in an intimate sense. Girls that are our friends or boys that are our friends, or even our family members, mothers and fathers and so forth, who mothers and fathers who might live separately, and we try to create some kind of division. This is the cause of us always having to be separated from our friends, that previously we created division amongst groups of people, and we didn't allow them to continue their friendships based on our greed and our desires to have them for ourselves. So in the future, we need to try to keep people together and try to build community amongst people instead of creating division.
Oje tatene tamba tanje dala maganas tamba bone kunge temba yi lengen sonja la ko yis tatene jibu tamba an shangju semba da hai sagala ma sagala tuskalo susul gabu jongu muduna garijin susul garijin ya ne jibu tamba susul maga yungo ro maga ba da garigin rebersna tane jibu tamba du yu gege du yu ne ane 가서 그래. tamba bone kongen temba dibi jubo jubo doja de tembi jebu de ane jibu tamba susul maga de yungo res tane dengan chonje ran lo ko tane ngabi jo na bon jas dibi jubo bon gores gebi jubo den gores.
When supreme holy lamas, supreme holy gurus find us displeasing, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now we have turned from gurus and teachings, preferring the counsel of misleading friends. Hereafter let's end our dependent relations with those who turn us away from the path. So we've been in the past able to meet with very high lamas and great scholars and very holy beings, yet we did not listen to their advice and we stayed away from them and actually chose to hang around with negative friends and negative people who really had no realization or interest in the path itself. And we actually have been turned away from the path based on those negative relationships that we've had in our lives. So in the future, we should end these kinds of relations and we should try to surround ourselves with the positive people who will aid us in our journey. In the source of all my good, or the foundation of all qualities, we can find the quote that says, let me give you the exact quote. May I never be separated from... Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. This is, bless me and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. So it's this particular line where they talk about true companions in this quest and the importance of it, and the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive people who can aid us in our journey, as opposed to negative people who are actually destroy our attitudes.